Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for attending here today. I'm Mark Levy. I'm president of Revenue Development Resources, and my partner and wife, Holly, is in the back there. And our other band of Merry Pirates, Bob Lawrence, is back there, too. You may remember Bob for his many years at the RAB. We'd like to congratulate both the RAB and the NAB for another great convention, and we'd certainly like to thank you for letting us be a part of it. Yeah, we do a lot of training for people, and we were going to do a little bit of a pitch, but we're not going to now. You come here for ideas, and you're going to get some great ideas to talk about hiring people, but there are some things going on right now in Florida and Texas that may actually be sales opportunities for you. So you're probably already on top of this, but if not, please make sure that when you go back to your office, you're calling on anybody that sells propane, heating oil, and cordwood. I can promise you that with lines in Dallas last week of gasoline around the block, that these prices are going to go up. So it's a good time now for your dealers to talk about buying now before the prices go up. The other thing, of course, would be high energy furnaces and anybody that sells wood stoves or inserts. That's a great category to call on too. Something you may not think about would be supplies for building drywall, things of that nature. They're going to be shipping a lot of that stuff down south. So for your teams to call on your building supply places, your contractors now, and again saying, not only do you need to buy it now before the prices go up, but you need to buy it now because after a while it's going to be hard to find in this neck of the woods. So with all that being said, we really do thank you for allowing Revenue Development Resources to be a part of this for as many years as we have. We'd love to talk to you about ways to grow revenue, ways to grow your people, ways to grow the relationships between your sellers, your on-air, and your audience. If we can ever help you in any way, please give us a call. Revenue Development Resources, you can find us online at rdrtoday.com. That's rdrtoday.com. And now I'd like to turn it over to your speaker, please.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Schmidt. Good morning.
Good morning.
Every year when we plan this event, we try to make it the best year ever. How are we doing? How was day one? Loving day one? All right. So, our session today is recruitment, attracting, and retaining top talent. Please silence your portable electronic devices. At the end of the session, take a moment to rate the session. I always love when I see people taking pictures of the screen, but you don't need to because the slide deck is on the app. If you have the app, scroll down below our speaker's name and you'll see the slide deck for you to take back to your market. Join us for lunch in the marketplace today at 11:30. Don't forget to participate in the Marketplace Tweet to Win contest. It's your chance to win one of 5 Amazon Echoes. Check the home screen of the app for full details. Has everybody downloaded the app? Yes? Because if you didn't download the app, you can also get on radioshowweb.com. When you get back to your office, you can also get the slides and everything there. So also visit the Marketplace exhibits. Find the Ford Fusion in booth 417, which is right across from the RAB booth at 420. And check out the Ford Fusion. It's the connected car experience, and they're giving in-car tours and all of that fun stuff. Have you ever hired somebody and found out something after you hired them that you wish you would have known before you hired them? Raise your hand if that's happened to you. Yes, it's happened to everybody. Several weeks after a young man had been hired, he was called into the personnel director's office, and the personnel director said, "What's the meaning of this? When you came on board, you said you had lots of experience. Now we find out that this is your first job." And the person said, "Hey, your radio ad for the gig said you needed somebody with imagination. So here I am." I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Tony Alessandra. Dr. Tony helps companies turn prospects into promoters. He's 2 speakers in one. He's a professor and a performer. As one client put it, he delivers college-level lectures in a comedy store format. Dr. Tony offers audiences the opportunity to enjoy themselves in learning practical, immediately applicable skills that positively affect their relationships with prospects, customers, co-workers, and helps you do a better job recruiting, hiring, and training. Because we're starting a little late, I'm going to ask you to read his full bio on the app. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Tony Alessandra.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Well, how many of you are interested in attracting and retaining quality sales talent? Can I see your hands? All right, otherwise you would not be here. Now, of course, the issue really is, wouldn't it be great if we could basically, excuse me, just bear with me one sec. Okay. Wouldn't it be great if we could attract the best and brightest and keep them productively employed, that we knew in advance that our hire was going to be successful, all right, a top performer, let's say in the top 25% or top 20%, and we could predict and prepare for potential issues or training or learning curves? How many people would be interested in one or more of these activities? All right? The problem of getting here is basically three things: wrong selection of salespeople, poor performance of the salespeople that we hire, and high turnover. How many of you deal with one or more of these issues? All right? Of the three, which would you say is the most serious? How many would say that wrong selection for you is the most serious of these three issues? Can I see your hands? All right, how about poor performance? Not enough sales or revenue. How about high turnover? All right, all three significant. So let's talk a little bit about selecting the wrong candidate. Over 48% of hired salespeople actually are not suited for selling. Now, why is that the case? Well, the example that Jeff gave about somebody not having any experience at all, but was quite creative in the way they set up their resume, typically in sales, and I found this out over the years, typically in sales, a lot of people use it as a transition in order to find another job better suited for their interests or talents. And sales managers typically spend 40% or more of their time working with people who are not yet competent. Now, the interesting thing is that we spend so much time working with people that we're trying to improve. How many of you have kids? How many of you have 2 or more kids? All right? And we find that people who have 2 or more children, usually one of them may be a high performer or maybe well-behaved, and there's another who may be a low performer who might not be well-behaved. And it seems like we spend more time with the underperformer, the person who is not behaving well, to get them to do what we want them to do, similar in sales, when in fact we sometimes ignore the people who are the high performers. And it affects their self-esteem, their appreciation, and after a while they may leave because they feel that you're not spending enough time with them. When we look at poor performance, how many of you are familiar with Pareto's principle? Pareto's principle is a 20-80 rule. 20% of our customers bring us 80% of our revenue. 20% of our customers, better yet, bring us 80% of our profit. But the same is true in sales. If we look at sales, about 20% of our salespeople possibly bring in 80% of our revenue or our profitability, all the way down to the bottom 20% who are not competent. Now, some people do this in quartiles. They may say 25%, 50%, and 25%. I just like Pareto's principle. The ideal would be to hire more of the top 20%. I mean, it's pretty obvious here, and less of the bottom 20%. The cost of a bad hire. Many people believe it's many, many thousands of dollars. Does anybody have sort of a figure in their head, or if you've done some research, what is the cost of a bad hire for you? Anybody? Cost of a bad hire? 1 year's salary, which might be how much? Ballpark. $40,000 or $50,000. And that's just in salary, okay? What about in terms of the mood that they create internally? What about the time involved on managers trying to train them up to no success? What about, worse yet, the impact they have on your customers? Because a poor salesperson, forget about the 1-year salary, a poor salesperson can cost many times more than that if they sour a relationship either with a prospect or with a current customer. So, the cost of a bad hire. Now, here's something that a lot of people don't think about. What about the cost of not hiring somebody who you should have hired, and a competitor hires that person? And now they are out in the marketplace actually selling against you and doing well. Have you found that to be true? Anybody? You know, maybe they're selling for a competitive station. Maybe they are selling for competitive media. But the fact is, there's two sides to this coin of a bad hire. The bad hire is if we hire somebody who is not successful, and we have that turnover, it costs us in terms of money, time, and possibly customer satisfaction, or even customer retention. But the other side of the coin is, what if we do not hire the right person for whatever reason, and maybe they go to a competitive company that's competing against us for our dollars? Why does it happen? Well, the interviewing process doesn't really work well. There's a lot of biases in the process. The traditional recruiting practices supposedly only get about 26% of the relevant information needed to hire somebody. Hiring managers don't have all the relevant information. For instance, the interview resume reference doesn't give the right information. For instance, in terms of a resume, a lot of resumes are not true. Now, Jeff mentioned about that one person who said he had experience and didn't. How many of you have found that somebody who has applied for a job gave incorrect information on their resume? Anybody? And it's not just incorrect information. Let's just say somebody puts correct information, but they bias what they put in there. They leave out any potential negatives. That's something that's very commonly done. Why would somebody put a negative on a resume? They only put their best foot forward. Also on references. In today's day and age, it is very dangerous to give a bad recommendation. Whether it is in writing, believe me, I'm a business owner, I would never put a bad recommendation in writing. Never. Because of fear of what? Getting sued. And the same thing, even over the telephone. You know, we try to find something good to say even about a poor employee. So when it comes to resumes and references, they're not great. About 88% of people in interviews, this goes beyond salespeople, about 88% either intentionally or unintentionally mislead in an interview. Again, put their best foot forward. And also, people who do the hiring, there's a bias. We tend to hire people we like, people who connect with us. Possibly if our bias is we like charismatic people, we like outgoing people, we like database people, we don't like certain people. There's a bias with hiring managers. So how do we solve these issues? We solve these issues, here's 3 different ways. Benchmarking, some selection and hiring strategies, and also training and performance reviews. Let's talk a little bit about benchmarking. How many of you are familiar with benchmarking? All right? So benchmarking is a way to create some objective data about whether or not a candidate will be successful or not. So it's a statistical analysis of the current sales force. What we do is we take online assessments, a variety of them, and we combine it with performance data, all right? The performance data could be, for instance, a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Are they in the top 25%, second 25%, et cetera? It could be how long they've been on the job with you. It could be how long they've been in the media business in general. Those are some of the performance data that we track against whether, you know, their assessment results. And what we do is we create a benchmark, and any candidate, when they take these assessments, are matched against that benchmark. Right? It's very statistical, it's very mathematical, it's very objective. So here's the assessment data with performance data. There comes my New York. And we can even reveal qualities of certain people that might not be in sales or might not be sales ready, but might be good at other particular jobs. Let me give you a case in point. One of my clients uses benchmarking. They use a single assessment. As we will see, that's not necessarily what I would suggest, but they have 40 plus years of data analysis with a single assessment, and they have a success record. They know exactly who to hire. But what they do is it's primarily for salespeople, and the companies that they do the benchmark for, they actually do it for all employees, various employees, internal employees, management employees. And so they create benchmarks for other jobs within a company, not just sales. So when somebody, a candidate for sales, so they're only looking for candidates for sales, when somebody takes the assessment and does not score well enough to be a salesperson, they actually may score high enough for another job within the company that may or may not be open, and they may want to look at a candidate to fill a particular job. Maybe it's customer service, maybe it's administrative person, maybe it's a detail-oriented person, maybe it's a person that handles all of the CRM, the customer retention management software, whatever it is, they do that. So the key here is that if we're going to use objective statistical assessments, and I'll explain what these assessments are. 2 assessments are better than 1. 3 assessments typically are better than 2. Once you get above 3, it's really sort of an overkill. So the first assessment that is used is a DISC assessment. How many are familiar with DISC? Can I see your hands? All right, DISC, those of you who are not familiar with DISC, let me just give you a brief overview. The D-I-S-C stand for 4 different patterns of behavior. The D is for dominance. The I is for influence. The S is for steadiness. The C is for either cautiousness or conscientiousness. D-I-S-C. These are patterns of behavior that are measured by the assessment. The assessment is 24 questions. And the questions are 4 adjectives, and the candidate actually has to pick from the 4 adjectives the 1 adjective that most describes them and the 1 adjective in that list of 4 that least describes them. And of course, through statistical analysis and algorithms, we come up with whether they are primarily a D, I, S, or C. However, let me mention that it is rare, absolutely rare, for somebody to be only a D, I, S, or C. What we find is that there is a combination of percentages of all 4 styles. Now, I mentioned that there is a company that only uses a single assessment. They've been using it for 40 years. They've been very, very successful. They have this down to a science. So even with a single assessment, they've been able to determine which candidates will be successful salespeople. And what they have found is that primarily it is people with a high I and a secondary style of D to some degree, an ID. Now, their particular style of selling is direct to the consumer, in the home selling, one-call selling. You with me on this? And they have a pattern that absolutely works. But they also know that there are other patterns, whatever they may be, that are better for inside type of jobs, not necessarily outside selling. So the dominant style, their key desire is for results, bottom line. Their motto, I want it done right, I want it done now, or better yet, I want it done when? Yesterday. They're in a hurry for everything, juggle a lot of things at the same time, do them well. They're great administrators, delegators. They work best under pressure, under deadlines, and they play to win. Their motto, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. Rarely, if ever, will you see a D play a game for funsies. So let's not keep score. Yeah, forget about it. They always play to win. Now, of all four styles, they do have an issue. They have a problem. Of all four styles, they are the weakest listeners. But there's a reason. They don't have time, and they already know the answer. Why listen? But that is an issue in selling, isn't it? If they're not very good listeners. Let's go to the I. The I, the high influence style. Their key desire, fun, excitement, applause, visibility, recognition, and as a result, they talk a lot about their favorite subject, themselves. Generally speaking, the I's are generally speaking because they have the gift of gab, the power of persuasion, the ability to get other people more excited about their ideas than even they are themselves. Very charismatic, very outgoing, very people-oriented. Problem area is they take on too much and have a problem finishing things. A motto for the I's, when all is said and done, more is often said than done. The S's, their key desire, the steady style, is harmony, safety, security, close one-on-one relationships, the true people, loyal, reliable team players, the glue that holds a team or a relationship together. Show me a marriage where one of the spouses is an S, and I will show you a long marriage. Not necessarily happy, but long. The S's are by far the best listeners. They listen for content and intent, facts and feelings. The problem area is they can't say no. They have a hard time saying no because they don't want to create conflict, they don't want to hurt people's feelings, and as a result, they overextend themselves and operate often on stress. The C's, the conscientious pattern, their key desire is for order, accuracy, precision, perfection. Their motto, everything in its place and a place for everything. Their patron saint, Spock from Star Trek. These are the great planners, problem solvers, organizers, great at creating systems, highly inventive. In all four styles, they are arguably the most intellectual. So I'll tell you this, you want something done right, give it to a C. You want it done on time, think again. Because they often suffer from paralysis by analysis. It has to be perfect, just right. So that's DISC. Now, a second assessment, and I'll show you an example of a company that uses both the DISC and motivators. DISC measures how people do what they do, how they do what they do. The motivators measures why, what motivates people to do things. So is a person economically motivated? Is the person altruistically motivated? Is the person theoretically motivated? Different motivators. We measure 7 motivators. And I'll show you an example of a company that used it in an auto sale. The workplace strengths assessment is DISC and HVP. Anybody familiar with HVP? It's called the Hartman Value Profile. And the Hartman Value Profile measures a person's quality of decision making. And of course, the last one is the, let's call it the trifecta, the triple play. This is the granddaddy. It's the DISC, the motivators, and the Hartman, We have one called the executive summary, and this is the one that measures, we could measure this for, we have 4 basic different forms of this assessment. We call it the executive summary. One for salespeople, one for service people, one for managers or leaders, and one just in general. And it gives people a grade from A to D in terms of hireability. Doesn't say not to hire somebody, it just gives a grade, and then gives several check marks in terms of competencies or traits or behaviors. And anybody who gets, let's say the check marks are red, yellow, and green, anything with a yellow or red, it also gives you a link to a page that gives you a significant explanation about what that potential problem is and how to deal with it, so especially in training. So our objectives in this whole selection process is to find candidates who have a high probability of success and who would be both a good fit in terms of the culture and a team. Now, you probably have heard the single biggest reason people quit a job is because of what? Anybody? Well, dissatisfaction with what? Well, I'm going to go beyond management. It's just relationships. It's the way they get along with people or don't get along with people. Culture, let's say, I've seen this more often than you can imagine, especially in companies that are detail-oriented and data-driven, companies that rely very much on CRM programs with their sales force. How many of you have a CRM system, like Infusionsoft or Salesforce.com, something along that line? So oftentimes they just don't work because you have salespeople who just don't want to take the time to fill in the proper information. Have you found that to be true? Salespeople just hate it. You know, their whole attitude is, hey, you want me to do reports or you want me to sell? I can't do both, pick one or the other. So a person has to be a good fit for the culture. If the culture is one that requires a lot of reports and detail to do analysis, and a salesperson either has never done that or doesn't want to do it, there is not a good fit. Even if the salesperson is successful, it is not a good fit. Because what it does is it puts pressure on other people within the company who have to make up for that salesperson's lack of filling in the data. We want to minimize the risk of hiring poor performers, reduce turnover. How many of you have an issue with turnover? Turnover of salespeople, can I see your hands? All right. And especially turnover of high performers. And here's an interesting thing that the selection system can do, especially with assessments and data, is that we can expand the applicant pool going outside of media, looking for people in other industries that actually would be successful in the radio business. So, job matching is very simple. Basically aligning people that you hire to match the job responsibilities that you hired them for. And we could measure that through these assessments, through the DISC, through the motivators, and through the Hartman Value Profile. So let's talk a little bit about some examples. All right? So let's talk about an auto sales situation. How many of you have customers who are in the auto business, auto dealerships, whatever? It's a very interesting study in the Southeast, measured 120 salespeople, measured them on all 3 assessments, DISC, motivators, and Hartman. In this particular study, they found that the Hartman Value Profile did not differentiate enough, but the DISC and motivators did. 2 objectives. Relate the research to job performance measured by the average sales per month of the salesperson and their length of employment, right, to see about turnover. Over 100 top salespeople, what they found was that the best salespeople in the top group in terms of performance and length of job longevity had a high D, which again, I've described it, goal-oriented, assertive, a low S in terms of, look, I want to do my own thing. I don't need to be in a group, just set me free. Now here's something that really threw me. On the motivators, they came out as high altruistic. Now think about that. An auto salesperson who is a high D driven, I get it, I buy it, but high altruistic, wanting to help other people, and low political. They don't try to control the customer. Here's what they found, that by hiring people who matched that benchmark, average sales after 3 months of hiring people that matched the benchmark, look at the difference in average sales per month from 3.9 to 7.1, and turnover went down 28%, hiring the right salespeople using the benchmark compared to what they were previously doing, which was really no benchmarking, no assessments, just the interview. Hey, do you have experience? Can we put a little mirror under your nose and see if you're breathing? You're hired. Let's look at a more sophisticated one. The situation, it's a company, 8 locations, $1 billion plus company, only sells a single product. It's a very discretionary product. Now, I say $3,000 to $10,000, but believe me, it could be a lot more. Sales process, very structured. Everybody has to give basically the same sales presentation. And it's consistent through all 8 locations. Sales face-to-face at 90 minutes. No follow-up. It's a one-call sale. You don't sell it, that's it. And all commission-based. Okay? The problem that they had is it's a very complicated sale. It's a high-dollar sale. And it requires a lot of training and product knowledge. High turnover, up to 155% a year in some locations. So they're literally turning over 1.5 times their sales force every year. Very limited applicant pool because it's a very specialized sale. And trying to hire people from competitors, same business, successful salespeople, doing the same thing for a competitor, not successful. All right? And they've tried to hire people outside of their industry, not really successful, inconsistent results. So the solution was they screened candidates with those 3 assessments, DISC, Motivators, and Hartman. They maintained a database of not just the assessment results, but the performance. And what they do is about every 6 months, they have the companies go back into a database and rank the sales candidates that they hired 1, 2, 3, or 4, based on where they were in sales. Top 25% all the way down to the bottom 25%. And then the algorithm, the benchmark, is adjusted every 6 months based on this new updated data. So it's an ongoing situation. And what they do is they rate salespeople high, moderate, or low. The results is in using this model and the 3 assessments, they reduced the turnover, look at that, from 155% plus to 30 to 45%, depending on which of the 8 locations. Low-risk employees, average sales 10 to 25% above the moderate or high risk. The applicant pool significantly increased because they're hiring the low-risk candidates, whereas before it was kind of seat of the pants. And they found that they actually can go to competitors and even go outside to other industries and hire salespeople or candidates, let's say candidates, who match the low-risk profile. Let's talk a little bit about retention, all right, which is another piece of the puzzle. So we hire salespeople. Let's even say we hire good salespeople, all low-risk salespeople. How do we retain them? Well, one area is training. How many of you actually have a structured sales training program for your hires? All right? and I would say at best there was maybe a third to a half of the hands, should be all the hands. And why is that? 3 reasons. No training. There are many companies out there that basically say, hey, you have radio sales experience, you have media sales experience, you have this many years, you must know what you're doing. But I'll tell you, there are salespeople who have 10 years of experience simply operating on the first year over and over and over again, not growing at all, not improving at all. But there are many companies that do no training. And one of the reasons is it's expensive to train salespeople. And there are companies that say, well, what if I train them and they leave? Look at what it cost me. But the bigger question is, what if you don't train them and they stay and do damage to your customer base? The second is inadequate training. When I say inadequate training, those companies that do training, sometimes they only focus on one aspect of training, and that is product knowledge. And they believe that the more a salesperson knows about the product, the more successful they will be. And I believe, and believe me, I've been in the sales training business, hate to say how long, but 47 years, is that possible? I don't feel that old, but anyway, I have found that the companies that do so much product knowledge training to get their salespeople so ingrained in the product, it almost gets the salespeople to talk too much about the product. I mean, if product knowledge was the end-all and the be-all of successful sales, let's send out the engineers. They know more about the product than anybody else. But how would they do? Not that well. And of course, there's inappropriate training. And when I say inappropriate training, I'm talking about training the old way. Now, I cut my teeth selling door-to-door. I worked my way through college selling door-to-door. Back in the 1960s, I was selling cookware, pots and pans, door-to-door. Was selling a 10-piece set of cookware. 1966, I want you to realize this. 1966, 10 pieces of cookware for $300. $300. And of course, my training back then was the big 3. How to give a razzle-dazzle pitch, 101 ways to overcome objections, and the 25 power closing techniques, which I loved the titles of those closing techniques. The tie-down close, the sharp angle close, the last-ditch close, the mother-in-law close, the half-Nelson close. They even had a technique that said, we will not teach you, this is true, by the way, we will not teach you a foot-in-the-door technique, because, again, we were selling door-to-door. So they told us, do not work on the foot-in-the-door technique, work on the head in the door, because the head in the door, even if they slam it, you can still talk. How many of you do performance reviews? Anybody, performance reviews? All right? And typically in performance reviews, they're typically done once a year, and it's typically how well is the employee performing for the company, okay? And I will tell you this, in 90 days after hiring somebody, for the most part, you will know whether or not they're going to be successful. Waiting a year, to me, is too long. But there's 2 parts, in my opinion, in a good performance review. And one, which is not necessarily done, is how well is the company meeting the employee's needs? And number 2, of course, is how well is the employee meeting the company's needs and the job responsibilities they were hired to do? Typically, those companies that do performance reviews only focus on the second thing and not on the first. I think it's very important to find out how well are we meeting your needs. So in summary, what we want to do is recruit the right people, all right? Getting the right person for the right job. Make sure that the candidates are matched against a benchmark, and it's the ideal salesperson benchmark. We want to train each hire to do what's expected. Make sure we put them through a training program that fits the needs of our customers, our products, our culture. Want to monitor how well they're doing, and again, I believe 90 days is a crucial first monitoring situation where we sit down and in 90 days do that performance review. How well is the company meeting your needs, and how well are you performing based on what we hired you to do? It is crucial to do that. And of course, nurture each hire to make sure that they feel that they are part of the team, that they are respected, that they are appreciated. I'm a high D, by the way. I have a hard time giving compliments. In fact, one of the few times you will hear me say well done is when I order a steak. And I do have issues with my employees saying to me that I don't compliment them enough. I don't let them know how well they do their job. So I mean, I have to force myself to take what I think, and I do think compliments, but I have to verbalize them. So I've been working on verbalizing compliments. By the way, we have a relationship that we're just kicking off with RAB. Jeff and I have created this relationship where we're actually going to do benchmarking or assessments for RAB members and non-members. But what I'd love to do is to do a benchmark study. I'd love to initially find out who are the ideal sales candidates for what you sell. And what I'd like to offer you, especially the people in here, is if you would like to be part of that study, zero cost. We'll give you links that you can send to your salespeople, and we'll then, at the end, tell you what the best benchmark is. But it's going to be a benchmark in general, not just specifically for your company, unless you have a huge company and want to just do a unique benchmark for your company. And I mentioned about that auto sales situation. The auto sales situation where they reduced turnover and increased sales, that was done in the Southeast. So the question is, will that model work for salespeople, auto salespeople, let's say in Los Angeles or New York City? We don't know. But we'll do a nationwide study. If you are interested in participating in that study, simply take out a business card, put benchmarking or benchmarking study on it, and give me the card, and we will contact you afterwards to be part of that study. Again, no cost on your part. Now, eventually, when you want to use the benchmark data later, you'll have to purchase assessments for the candidates. But for this study, for this benchmark, there's no cost. So I think we're out of time now. Yes. Any questions, by the way? We have a couple of minutes. Any questions? Yes.
So I've done like Omnia profiles and things, and this is one of the things that you can't get from an assessment is somebody's work ethic. You often will hire somebody who
I'll repeat this.
interviews well, who does a good job when they're there.
Yeah.
But the issue of them actually showing up to work or other things in their life, and I've had clients who don't hire anybody who has less than a 650 credit score because if they have bad credit,
Okay.
You look at all the different things that you can eliminate that, but I just wanted to get your insights on.
All right, so the question was, she uses an assessment, but it doesn't measure work ethic. One of the things you will find is that part of what you get with that Hartman profile is it'll show you some work ethic check marks. So you'll get some data there. Any other questions? Yes?
Have you found any other type of industry people that work well in broadcast radio sales?
Have I found any people outside of the broadcast industry that work well in radio sales? Not yet. But we will. We will. I will tell you, I'm in the assessment business, and I actually hired somebody from the media business who is very successful, and he has been beyond spectacular, beyond. Our revenue's up over 50% this year, and it's all because of this hire. But he came from the media world. So, yeah, there is some crossover from other industries. We just will have to see, after we do this research, what that might be. And that'll be part of our study, let's say phase 2 or 3, where we'll look at other industries and see if there is a crossover.
Would you mind asking the question to the crowd if anybody has found a particular source?
Okay, so the question is, has anybody found a source of successful radio salespeople who are outside of the media sales industry? Yes?
I just recently hired a guy who for 18 years did door-to-door vacuum sales.
Door-to-door vacuum sales.
He can read people better than anyone I have ever met. He already has a way of going in and approaching people because he's doing something that none of us in this room would ever think of doing. Getting the door slammed in our face.
Right.
That's what our salespeople do every day. Fantastic. The guy's been with us now for 6 months. Was named our employee of the quarter. I mean, he's assimilated well into the business.
All right, so the comment was a door-to-door vacuum sales person. And the example that I gave you, the company that uses just the DISC assessment, they're basically in not that particular industry. It's a much broader industry, but it is door-to-door in the home, of which a vacuum cleaner salesperson would be part of it. But it could be other things like water softeners. It could be, aluminum siding, anything where people are selling direct to the consumer in the home. So maybe we can expand that because they do the exact same thing. And again, they have found success with a single assessment. So, two people out of the education. Now, what did they do in the education field? Somebody ran a private school, okay, so sort of an administrative. One worked with challenged children. Yeah. Yeah, I would say that is probably an outlier, whereas the door-to-door vacuum cleaner is probably a better bet. One more question, ladies and gentlemen, and we're out of time.
Small, in-the-market, nonprofit fundraisers. Know a lot of people in the community, not afraid of top personnel in the marketplace.
All right, so small market, you said, or small?
Small, in the market, small fundraisers,
Small
small nonprofits.
nonprofit fundraisers. And by the way, there's an interesting technique that they have learned. Whenever you go out asking for money, always give people 3 options, 3 levels of donation, because people will invariably pick the middle one. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, how many of you believe that you've learned at least one thing that you will take back and put into play? Can I see your hands? Excellent. Thank you very much. Have a great...
Thank you, Dr. Tony. Brandis is going to be at the front of the room collecting business cards if you want to be a part of the benchmarking that we talked about. And Dr. Tony is coming to the RAB booth 420 right now after the session if you have more questions or want to follow up with him. And we also have some handouts about assessments at the RAB booth. So thank you.